You probably think royalty in history meant safety, luxury, and power. Golden palaces, silk clothes, a life protected from the hardships of ordinary people. But imagine waking up tomorrow as a young woman inside the Ottoman Imperial Harem. A place remembered today as exotic and romantic, yet for most women who entered it, survival itself was uncertain. Behind the marble walls of Topkapi Palace existed a world that functioned less like a home and more like a carefully managed system. Hundreds of women lived there at any given time, separated from families, renamed, retrained, and placed under strict control. Their lives were governed by schedules, rules, and rituals that left little room for personal choice. What modern movies portray as luxury was, in reality, a gilded confinement. European ambassadors who visited the palace often arrived with their own brutal standards of the age. These were men who came from societies where public executions were entertainment and which trials were accepted. Yet even they wrote with visible discomfort about what they witnessed inside the imperial harem. Not because it was chaotic, but because it was organized. Every decision followed protocol. Every punishment followed procedure. Every disappearance had paperwork. This system was not random cruelty. It was structured control. Each evening, as the sun set over Istanbul, the palace entered a ritual that determined the fate of women who had spent their youth waiting. Selection nights were moments of extreme tension. Hundreds of women lived with the awareness that being noticed could mean advancement or ruin, and being forgotten could mean slow erasure. Survival depended not only on favor, but on circumstance, health, and timing beyond their control. Biology itself became a liability. Natural processes that should have been harmless were treated as violations of order. Palace records describe women removed quietly. Their absence explained with neutral phrases like illness or reassignment. Language was used to soften reality, transforming human loss into administrative routine. The system extended beyond selection. Women chosen for intimacy were subjected to examinations framed as medical and moral assessments. Their bodies were evaluated not as human beings, but as assets tied to succession and political stability. Only a tiny fraction would ever bear children. Fewer still would live long enough to gain security through motherhood. For most, the years passed in waiting, training, and uncertainty. What made the system effective was not only fear, but competition. Isolation ensured that unity was rare. Women were encouraged, subtly and openly, to see each other as rivals rather than allies. Favor was limited. Safety was scarce. In such an environment, survival often meant silence. Out of this system emerged one of history's most famous figures, a young woman taken from Eastern Europe who would later be known as Harem Sultan. Her story is often told as a romance, but stripped of decoration, it is a case study in adaptation under extreme conditions. She learned languages rapidly, observed palace politics closely, and reshaped herself to meet the expectations of power. She survived by mastering the rules that destroyed others. Her rise did not end the system. It proved that survival was possible only through exceptional transformation. Most women had no such path. Those who aged, fell ill, or became inconvenient were removed discreetly. Some were relocated to old palaces, places described by visitors as silent and decaying, filled with women who waited out their lives away from court. The methods of removal were designed to leave no spectacle. The palace valued quiet outcomes. Officials believed order depended on deaths that did not provoke unrest or religious controversy. Execution, when it occurred, was treated as a technical task, assigned to trained personnel and evaluated for efficiency. The language of care was used to describe acts of elimination. Financial records reveal how normalized this had become. Expenses were tracked. Maintenance costs were calculated. Transport fees were logged. The human consequences were reduced to columns of numbers. This was not secrecy. It was normalization. The harem did not exist in isolation. Its logic reflected a broader imperial mindset that valued control over continuity. The same thinking appeared in the empire's child collection system, known as the devshirme. Christian boys from across the Balkans were taken at intervals, transported to the capital, renamed, and trained to serve the state. Families lost sons permanently. Communities lost generations. These boys were educated intensively. Some rose to high office. Many became soldiers. Their success is often cited as evidence of opportunity, yet opportunity came only after total separation from family, identity, and choice. Loyalty was engineered through dependence. Inside palace schools, discipline and instruction existed alongside rigid hierarchies. Advancement depended on obedience. Silence was rewarded. Resistance was punished. Like the harem, the system relied on victims enforcing rules upon each other, reducing the need for constant external force. What makes these systems difficult to confront today is their efficiency. They worked. They produced administrators, soldiers, and stability for centuries. They also erased countless individual lives from history. Names appear briefly in ledgers, then vanish. No graves. No descendants to remember them. When historians began digitizing Ottoman archives in the 20th century, patterns became impossible to ignore. High turnover rates, consistent gaps in records, statistical impossibilities explained away as coincidence. The numbers revealed what narratives concealed: a structure built on disposability. The end of these systems did not come from moral awakening. They collapsed under political pressure, economic change, and imperial decline. Reforms arrived late and with resistance. Even abolition laws often excluded palace institutions. Freedom, when it finally came, arrived to people who no longer knew how to live outside confinement. Some former residents refused to leave. The outside world frightened them more than the palace ever had. This was not weakness. It was conditioning. Today, Topkapi Palace is a museum. Visitors admire tiles, courtyards, and views over the Bosphorus. Guidebooks describe intrigue and elegance. The language is careful. Violence is softened. Suffering becomes atmosphere rather than fact. Yet the records remain. The bureaucracy preserved its own evidence. Orders, budgets, correspondence, and reports survive. Together, they tell a story not of excess, but of systematized control. Of harm administered calmly, legally, and repeatedly. This is why remembering matters. Not to single out one empire as uniquely cruel, but to recognize how easily institutions normalize abuse when it is profitable, traditional, or politically useful. The past warns us that beauty and brutality can coexist, that culture can mask harm, and that ordinary people can maintain extraordinary cruelty when systems demand compliance. When history is romanticized, victims disappear twice. First from life, then from memory. The women of the Imperial Harem left no memoirs. The boys taken through state policy left few records of their own voices. What remains are the structures that consumed them. So when we walk through palaces and admire civilizations, we owe it to history to ask harder questions. Who paid the price for this beauty? Who was silenced so stability could exist? And how many systems today rely on similar logic, hidden behind language, tradition, or convenience? The past is not dangerous because it was cruel. It is dangerous when it is misremembered. Because forgetting does not erase systems like these. It only makes them easier to repeat.